There is a place that is spoken about only in whispers, a dark area that spawns the beginnings of urban legends, a place where anything can happen and usually does. During the light of day, it hides just outside of view, but when the sun goes down, spirits, creatures of the night, roam free, and things do go bump in the night. It is in every state and every country, and there is no escaping it, no matter how safe you feel behind your locked doors and latched windows. So we invite you to turn down the lights and turn up your radio while we join Dave Schrader and Tim Dennis, your hosts, on a journey into the darkness on the edge of town.
Well, good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us here in the second hour of our show. You're listening to the Darkness on the Edge of Town Paranormal Radio Show. I'm your host, Dave Schrader, and this evening we're talking about reincarnation. We just got off with Denise Lynn, and again, for more information on Denise and to check out her website, please check out her site at Denise, DeniseLINN.com. Our next guest, though, is a returning guest to our show. Hr.2 Danalek is an author, and he's going to lead us in a discussion tonight again about the evidence for and the mechanics of how reincarnation works, why we reincarnate, the role of our soul in spiritual evolution, the role of karma, etc., as well as how the spirit realm works in general. He's written a couple of different books that we've spoken about on the show before. This one we're going to talk to tonight is about Mysteries of Reincarnation. We also did The Case for Ghosts by J.L. Danalek. And Mr. Danalek will be joining us on the Stanley event that we're doing here at the end of March and in April. And he'll be doing a talk there about reincarnation and also be there to answer your questions about ghosts. We want to welcome back to the show J.L. Danalek. Good evening, Mr. Danalek. How are you?
Hey, Dave. How you doing, guy?
Doing great. Thanks a lot for joining us back here on the show. Appreciate having you here.
No problem.
Let's get right into it. Now, the book is called Mysteries of Reincarnation.
Mm-hmm.
What got you interested into the look into reincarnation yourself?
Well, I guess after 20 years of traditional church beliefs, I got curious about it. They just weren't answering all my questions, so I started doing a little bit more research on it. Got into some of Edgar Cayce's writings and things of that nature, and after about 2 or 3 years, just decided that it made more sense from an eternal position than anything else I'd come across, and that's when I started putting the book together.
Well, now tell us a little bit about the book. Now, are you just going in at it from a wanting to believe standpoint? Are you going at it with a skeptical slant? What exactly are you trying to find for us by doing this book?
Well, what I try to do is take information that I've come across and bring it all together in one place in kind of an objective manner. Hopefully the reader will be able to look at what I've put together in here and at least come away with a better understanding of what reincarnation teaches, then they can decide for themselves if it has anything to say to them or not. So it's really more of a balanced approach. I deal with some of the objections to reincarnation, some of the problems with it, as well as some theories about how it works. So it's kind of a well-rounded approach to it.
Well, let's start off with that. Let's start off with some of the problems with reincarnation. What problems have you found involved in reincarnation and the theory of how it works?
Well, one of the biggest objections people comment about it is if we have past lives, why don't we remember what happened in the last life? It doesn't make much sense to keep living lives over again if you don't learn from them.
Right.
And after thinking about that for a while and kind of considering the issue a little bit, I decided that what we really need to do is, if we're going through each life, we can't remember everything that happened in the last life. Otherwise, we're just going to pick up where we left off. We're not going to learn anything really new.
Okay.
So it made sense to me that you wouldn't remember what happened in a past life for the reason that you wouldn't be able to develop otherwise. The only times you do remember things from a past life is if they were traumatic in some way, or there's some kind of a problem. Then you have to deal with them, and that's when people usually start going to past life regression, hypnosis therapists, and things like that to take care of it. But for the most part, we need to forget, so we have a kind of a clean slate to work from.
All right. Well, that helps us out too. Yeah, I mean, you would think, when the experiences I've had in my life, there seems to be answers that come very easily to me, as there are to so many people, right? that it lends itself to believe that maybe I did do this or a version of this life before. Because there are some things in sales I've been very gifted at ever since I was a child, where I was able to step in and I'm quick on my feet. I'm able to think through an issue and a problem and get around it. And it, a lot of times, I didn't have great schooling, growing up. I don't know where it comes from. Do you believe that that's something that we've carried over?
Right. I believe that we carry some of these elements from past lives over to us. In other words, all the experiences that we undergo during a life goes back into the resident soul, the higher self, if you will, when we die. And then that higher self will generate a new personality based upon that new template, that new information it's acquired. So each time you come into the flesh, you're pulling in some of the experiences and events from other lives, not the specific details of them, but the general gist of them. For example, if you're a very patient person and you don't really know why you're so patient, chances are you probably went through circumstances in previous lives where you learned patience. And then you may not remember exactly what those circumstances were, but the benefits of it are still there.
All right, well, that makes sense. Going through the logistics of reincarnation, now, do you believe in your studies and understanding of it, does it happen to everybody? Do we all reincarnate, or can we just die and go be in the light? Do you believe that there's a steady flow of us continuing to recycle, if you will?
Well, you got to understand the purpose of reincarnation is to grow spiritually. It's God's mechanism of experiencing things in the practical world instead of just the world of concepts. So in that respect, then, if you don't reincarnate, you really can't grow or experience anything. Now, I do believe that you can choose to come back to an earthly venue, or you can choose to experience things in other venues. But I don't think you're just going to sit there and not do anything for eternity. You're going to have to move in one direction or another and experience something on some level. But I believe that once you start reincarnating onto Earth, for example, as a human, I think that you start a process that you need to move all the way through to really get the full benefits of it. So in that respect, I do believe that everybody reincarnates, although sometimes people complete their process and they move on to some other format when they're done.
Now, for those of you listening, too, if you have questions for Mr. Danalek, you can go ahead and join us in our live chat room by going to our darknessradio.com/listen. You'll see a link to take you into the live chat room. Just click it. You don't have to put in any secret passwords or anything. Just join us in the chat room. And if you're in the chat room and you have questions, just go ahead and PM my co-host, Tim. Darkness Radio Tim is in the room, and he'll be able to take the questions for Mr. Danalek, as my computer's about to shut down here, so I won't be able to access that part of it anymore, Tim. So if you can keep an eye on the questions for Mr. Danalek, that'll be a good deal. Now let's go. Let's kind of start at the beginning then. So with this book, you wanted to kind of break down, look at all the different aspects of reincarnation. Is there anything that you found to be a really compelling proof that reincarnation exists?
I think the best evidence for it is some of the past life conscious memories in children that Dr. Ian Stevenson studied. Dr. Stevenson was a psychiatrist in the University of Virginia who back in the 50s began studying cases of children as young as 4 or 5 years old who could consciously remember past lives. And they would remember being married, having children, where they lived, how they died. This is little 4 or 5-year-olds. As soon as they could talk, they were telling these stories about their other lives. And so he would go and he would study these children. He'd interview them. And then he would go to the village that they said they were from. And he would talk to people there who had remembered this person in the previous life. And he wrote extensively on about 20 cases in some of his books, but he had over 3,000 that he looked at. And those, I think, are the most compelling evidence of reincarnation, just because they're not hypnotically induced. They're not a matter of hypnotizing these kids. These are things they remember consciously. And actually, they sort of forget about them by the time they hit adolescence.
Well, now, let me ask you. You did your book on ghosts. I know you talk a lot about energy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I posed this question for our last guest. Let me get your take on this. If we are all, in fact, nothing more than just a form of energy encapsulated, right? And we can share energy. Maybe that's where our psychic connection to loved ones comes from is that we're kind of reaching out and touching that energy of our friends and relatives. Mm-hmm. So we sense when somebody's upset, or we make that call. What if we're more along the lines of just like a radio, and these past lives that have lived are just a frequency that's out there bouncing around, and it just so happens that these kids work on the same vibrational level as the spirit that that passed on, and all we're doing is just receiving their wave. Does that make sense to you? I mean, is that something that you think there could be some validity to?
Yeah, that's one theory that's out there, is the idea that you're not really living a past life. You're actually communicating with the spirit of a dead person, and you're kind of absorbing their life into your own. I think that, sure, that's some validity to it, but the problem is that if that were the case, then you should have several people perhaps remembering the same past life.
Well, there have been. That's what I find curious is look at how many people know intimate details about the life of Lincoln or Kennedy that they shouldn't know, but they claim to be the reincarnated version of them. But they do have some limitations to their knowledge and information as well, but it's stuff that isn't public knowledge and isn't, that you can Google it and find it on the internet, because there are people that share reincarnated thoughts. Can a soul split? Can a soul, my soul, is that how, maybe we reincarnate? There's billions more people now than there was 100,000 years ago or 1,000,000 years ago. Can the soul split? Is that kind of how maybe we're able to continue on and reincarnate?
No, I don't think that souls split. I think there's actually more souls out there than we believe. I did some studies on how many people are on the planet today, about 6.5 billion, and then I compared that using demographic research with how many people have lived, say, in the 19th century and in the 18th century and the 17th, all the way back to about 5,000 BC.
Okay.
And if you do that, figuring that the average population of the planet was about 200 to 250 million throughout most of the recorded history, that leaves a huge number of people have lived and died on this planet, far more than the 6.5 billion that are on here now. In fact, the number of people alive today is about 5 or 6% of the total that's ever existed, which means that there are plenty of people have been here before to give everybody dozens of past lives. So it's something of a misnomer to think that there's too many people today to account for. Plus, we don't know how many souls are coming into this cycle, on a continual basis. They may be introducing new souls. That's why you have young souls and old souls. You have some people who are just starting the journey, and maybe have only reincarnated a couple of times. Then you have others that have reincarnated hundreds of times. So
where do these souls come from then? I mean, in your belief or understanding of this and the research that you've done, where are new souls coming from?
Well, my understanding is that there's a universal consciousness, or a divine mind, and that this divine mind knows everything, but it cannot experience anything because it is the all of all. There's nothing it cannot. In order to experience something, it has to not be something, if that makes sense. So in order for God to experience anything, he has to sort of shatter into little pieces, little itty-bitty pieces of himself. And these are what come into the physical realm. Those are like God's cells, if you will. So a soul is really a tiny piece of God. And now the problem is that God is outside of time. So this is something that is happening continually in the moment, has always been happening, always will happen. It's an infinite process that's happening simultaneously. So it gets a little bit confusing and a little complex. But so souls are moving in and out of this process as elements of God experiencing itself, if that makes sense.
All right, sure. We've got Tim's got a couple questions coming in from the people on the board, so Tim, go ahead.
I got about 8,000 questions here.
Oh, my goodness.
Mr. Danalek, so just deal with me here. Okay, I think we go back to the split and spread theory, so to speak, and that doesn't sound right when I say it. But Shay on the board says a question, why not split and spread? We are energy. Energy cannot be created or destroyed, but who says that it can't move change and then spread, I think is what she's trying to say.
Well, the idea is that a soul is an individualized part of energy. It's the same as all the other energy out there, but in order for it to have any kind of a collective experience, it has to remain intact as an individual element, which is why it wouldn't make any sense for it to split and fold and multiply and do all these different things. It would lose the essence of the experiences that it's going through.
Okay. Tim, did you have another one?
Oh, we got a whole bunch here.
Okay.
Let's go to Spellfire's question, which actually has something to do with careers and past lives. Spellfire says, I used to have a lot of dreams that I was a blacksmith as a child. Then one day I visited a blacksmith shop and felt right at home and learned the trade real quick. I am now a blacksmith by trade. Do you think that a past life might actually influence your career choices?
Oh, absolutely. I think it influences both your career choices as well as your fears, your phobias. A lot of different areas of your life are affected by it. I've heard stories of people who went into be, say, a pilot, and they were able to pick it up almost immediately. They were natural pilots. They just were able to learn how to fly an airplane in a matter of hours, and other people struggle for weeks, to get to that point. So I do think that if you had a profession that you really were good at and you enjoyed in a past life, I don't see any reason why you wouldn't necessarily bring that into the next life. However, I think that to repeat the same experience over and over again is also not too helpful. So you don't want to stay a blacksmith or a pilot every lifetime because you're not really growing or expanding. But that is one explanation for why people have a certain affinity for certain professions that other people just don't.
Well, now that kind of is interesting with the fact of one of the more famous people that believe that they were reincarnated was George Patton, right? And that's how he seemed to know where things were going to happen during the war, and he had like that sixth sense going on for him because he believed that he'd been there before and knew the lay of the land, right?
Right. What he used to actually be able to do was to drive onto ancient battlefields and describe the scenes that he had seen in his mind's eye from that battle. He believed he was a Carthaginian warrior, and he did that a couple of times. He seemed to have this, not the sense of what was going to happen in his life, but he had a sense of what had happened in previous lives. And apparently he was a warrior soul that kept coming back in each time as a warrior. And interestingly enough, it's almost as though he sensed that he had fulfilled his purpose in his life because just a few months after the end of World War II, of course, he was killed in Germany in a car wreck. It's almost like he knew that it was time to check out. He wasn't going to get any further in that incarnation as a warrior.
Well, before we take a break here, let's ask you, now, have you ever yourself had a past life regression?
Yes, I have. I had one a couple of years ago. I came up with 3 different past lives.
And what were they? Would you share those with us?
Yeah, the most recent one was I was a German soldier in the Wehrmacht. I was killed in Russia in 1941 at the age of about 20. The life before that, I was, I believe, a history professor in a college in New England back in the late 19th century. And the one before that, which was the most surprising to me anyway, was that I was some kind of a street thug in London in the early 19th century, died of tuberculosis at a very early age.
Well, I believe that because every time you see Tim and I, you're always roughing us up for money in a corner somewhere.
Yeah, I know. I just can't seem to shake that part of my persona.
So you've had 3 lives that you're aware of.
Right.
Do you believe that it extends beyond that?
Oh, yeah. I imagine it goes back dozens more times. We only had time in the hour and a half to go back that far. But
well, let me ask you this though: do you believe? Now, do you have? I'll ask you this question, and we'll go to break, and you can answer it when we come back. With the past lives that you've led, I'm curious. Did you, growing up, have an interest in World War II history? Did you have an interest in history in general? And did you, do you see that there are things that could tie you to these past lives that may just be, in a past life regression, you fleshing out the ideals of something that you've always had an interest in? So maybe in a sense it's your psyche trying to explain why you have these interests. Just something to kind of chew on. We'll take a quick break. We're going to be right back. You're listening to The Darkness on the Edge of Town, paranormal radio show. I'm your host, Dave Schrader, along with me, my co-host and producer, Tim Dennis. And our guest this evening is J. Allen Danalek. If you have any questions, you can go ahead and feel free to pop them over onto our live chat board, and we'll get those on for Mr. Danalek. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more of your questions and more with Mr. Danalek right after this.
It will keep you on the edge of your seat.
I must have drank me about 15 Dr. Peppers.
I gotta pay.
Just don't get any on the floor. Hurry back. There is more to come from The Darkness on the Edge of Town.
For 58 years, Fate has consistently supplied its loyal readership with a broad array of true reports of the strange and unknown. Fate is a factual magazine containing articles by experts in all walks of life, and by others just like you who have something dynamic, significant, and truthful to say. Keep up with the latest on angels and miracles, psychic phenomena, ghosts, UFOs, archaeological hotspots, alternative science, and much, much more. To receive your free Fate magazine, call now at 1-800-728-2730 or visit our website at www.fatemag.com. That's 1-800-728-2730 or www.fatemag.com. What are you waiting for? Your fate awaits.
Are you tired of reading about what couple in Hollywood is breaking up or divorcing? Have you ever wondered where you can find the news that covers the subjects that you are really interested in? I would like to invite you to visit supernaturalnews.com. Supernatural News uses the latest internet technology to search for the topics we know you will be interested in reading. News of the latest Bigfoot, UFO, or Loch Ness Monster sightings. Read about the latest conspiracy theories and urban legends. Supernatural News, where belief and reality merge.
You may have been to the Stanley Hotel before. You may have even taken the ghost tour offered at that famous hotel in Estes Park. But have you ever truly investigated the paranormal there before? Wouldn't you like to have the opportunity to do so with Sci-Fi TV's Ghost Hunters, Jason Hawes and Grant Wilson? Well, now you can. Join us for our paranormal retreat April 1st through the 4th at the historic Stanley Hotel. To find out more about this great adventure, visit darknessevents.com. That's darknessevents.com. Hurry, spots are limited and they will fill quickly. That's darknessevents.com.
The smell of voodoo hangs in the air. Either that or Dave and Tim had the 7-bean salad for dinner.
Don't nobody go in the bathroom for about 45 minutes. Somebody open the window.
Welcome back to The Darkness, or whatever is hanging in the air on the edge of town.
Well, good evening and welcome back to the show. I'm Dave Schrader. Our guest this evening is J. Allen Danalek. We're talking about his book, Mysteries of Reincarnation. And before we left for the break, I posed a question for Mr. Danalek, and let's see if he's got an answer for us.
Well, Dave, yes, actually. First of all, I say that when I grew up as a teenager, when I hit about 13, I suddenly developed this tremendous fascination for the military, especially military history, most predominantly World War II.
Okay.
I had a military collection. Almost everything I read or watched on TV was military, and I even used to wear these big black Wellington boots as my only real source of footwear. And
Okay.
It turns out that this is the same type of boot that the German soldiers wore in World War II. In any case, this was all before I had even thought about reincarnation. I was just a kid, and it took me quite a few years to work that out of my system. Now that I took the past life regression, I suspected before I sat down that this might have been the case, considering my fascination with World War II, especially the Russian front, and it was confirmed. So that does make it suspicious. However, there were details brought out during this regression session that were beyond anything I had really imagined, which I thought was interesting and confirming in many ways.
Well, were you able to get a name for this soldier? And if so, were you able to do any research to find out about this soldier in Germany? I would suppose that's pretty hard, but...
Well, it's interesting. In the past life regression, you're not really thinking in terms of specific dates, times, places. You got to think of it from the perspective of a 20-year-old kid in Russia in 1941. He probably doesn't know where he is. I would get bits and pieces of names of other people, but nothing that I could verify. For example, I would get, this guy over here is named Heinrich, and he's bald, and he's like in his 30s. And my name was Willie or Wilhelm. I could do things like that, but in terms of getting full names and regiments and all these kinds of things, it was kind of frustrating that you just don't really usually have access to that kind of information. It's much more general. It's much more how you feel about things rather than what you're actually seeing.
Because that's the one thing that I find is so interesting. What do you consider as how many people's belief of reincarnation is maybe just that they're, you have all these people that are into the Renaissance fair. Mm-hmm. They dress up in Renaissance clothing, and they were sure that in their past life they slew dragons and, rode horseback and jousted and all this such. Well, if that's our interest, isn't that maybe just more of us, interpreting that that's what we really wish our life would have been more like, or that's the time era that we wished we belonged to, and that's why we create these fantasy lives, but then that's why we can't give a specific area or a town that we grew up in or information like that can be more leading and compelling to prove this as a scientific fact.
Sure. I know the big problem with reincarnation is the lack of verifiable evidence that comes out of most of these sessions. I've talked to my hypnotist. He's done a number of these, and he rarely, if ever, gets anything come out of them that's verifiable. However, he rarely, if ever, gets people coming up with anything that interesting either.
Right.
People who imagine they were Napoleon or Roosevelt or whatever, he's never seen this. These are people who come up with very mundane lives. Now, in terms of they do it. They're farmers, they're miners, whatever they are, but it's nothing really that interesting. I watched a couple of other sessions he did with other people, my sister and a niece of mine, and they came up with very sedate, ordinary lives. Nothing about them was particularly fantastic. And I'm thinking if someone was going to make up a past life, they would come up with something a little bit more interesting than my niece came up with that she was a printer back in the 1940s at a little print shop. Not exactly a real romantic type of fantasy.
Well, let me ask you about this then, Jeff, because one of the things that I've always had a concern for, I've had a dream. I had a dream, Tim, and it was where, and it's been a reoccurring dream, I see myself almost like in a movie. And I know that person is me, but it looks nothing like me. Not ever. It's not like, oh, yeah, I'm fantasizing I'm skinny and have hair again. It's that this person looks nothing like me. And he has a different name, but I know it's me.
Right.
And I've seen, segments of their life, almost like I'm watching a TV show. But as things happen, I'll feel the hit, or I'll feel the hunger, or I'll feel the, accident when it happens in the car. Do you believe that might be what I'm tapping into, or do you believe that maybe it's more of an interdimensional thing that I might be experiencing or witnessing myself?
Well, from what you describe, it does sound like you're tapping into a past life experience, something that happened in a lifetime that has somehow stuck in your psyche, either as a trauma or as something you need to look at and examine to see what lessons it has to teach you. Apparently there's something in there that isn't letting go of that past life until you either examine it more closely or deal with it in some way, and then it'll go away once it's finished its purpose.
Okay. Well, that makes sense. It's always been very, it's always been a part of me, and I've had that dream set of dreams that occur ever since I was probably 10, 11 years old. Mm-hmm. And I was just very aware that I was that man, but I just couldn't figure out a connection to it. Now, I do have an incredible fear of something, and I won't say what it is out loud. I joke around on, spaces like MySpace and stuff. When they ask what my fear is, I say wet shoelaces.
It's me, actually.
It is Tim.
Yeah.
I'm
Not
afraid of
him,
Tim.
yeah.
No, but I do have a huge fear of something that I don't talk about because, people are cruel and they like to screw with you and stuff that you're afraid of. So I don't actually talk about it. But what could be if we have a fear of waterfalls, or we have a fear of convertibles, or we have a fear of spiders or snakes or scorpions, or what are you finding? Are most of these people, was that the way that they were killed? Was that something that occurred traumatically? Because I have no recollection of ever having any dealings with my fear in this lifetime.
Right. Well, we develop fears and phobias naturally in the course of our life. If you ever, almost drowned, usually you'll have a real hesitancy around water after
Right.
that. However, if you don't have an event in your life to explain that fear, then chances are it was a past life trauma, and it probably was something that took your life, especially if it's something that's very quick and unexpected and tragic, where a person was so traumatized by the event that they hold on to it into the next incarnations. In fact, that's a lot of the reason that a lot of people go to hypnotists to deal with these phobias. That's why they first go in and get a regression therapy done, because they want to deal with that underlying phobia. And what's curious about that is even psychiatrists who don't believe in reincarnation will still use this process to help their clients. So it's even if you don't believe in reincarnation, you can still past life regress someone, and they will come up with this trauma invariably, and it will be dealt with to some degree.
Well, one of the other things that we had a speaker on last year that made a comment to us about this, and I'm curious what your thoughts are about carrying things over from your past lives. Perhaps you had an abortion in your past life, and then some women in this life, their bodily shape will almost appear like they're pregnant. Does that make sense to you? I mean, do you understand the question I'm asking? Is that something that you're familiar with or have heard about?
Well, I'm not familiar with that particular phenomenon. I have heard, however, of having birthmarks in one life that mimic the wounds somebody might have received in a prior life. Ian Stevenson, the gentleman I referred to a moment who did the investigations of the children, had a number of cases in which children were born with scars or some kind of deformity that mimicked what happened to them in their last life. If they were, for example, he had one kid from Turkey who claimed to have been shot in the side of the head with a shotgun. Well, in this life, he had a small deformed ear on the right side, which would mimic very much the wounds that he received from the shotgun blast in the past life. So I've heard of those cases happening. So apparently you can carry some physical elements from one life to another.
Because according to this speaker that we spoke to in the past, they said that there are some of these things that cling to you, these spirits, like the spirit of the child from the abortion may have clung to you into the next life, and you need to have it stripped from your aura or from your being. Some of these things that you've carried from a past life on into this life, which makes no sense. Why you're super overweight and everybody in your family is really skinny, but in your past life you were a very overweight person. I mean, do you believe that you can bring that stuff forward with you as well? Or, to me it seems strange because that's an energy.
Well, I think that if you perhaps starve to death in a past life, it might manifest itself in overeating in this life.
Okay.
Because the trauma of not having enough food and being malnutrition came back with you, and now you overeat and you overdo it, and that's why you're heavy, while your siblings may not be because they don't have that same trauma. I do think there's definitely a psychological, biological link here that you have to take into account. Things that happen to you in a past life, if they traumatize you in different ways, some of these are going to manifest themselves physiologically in your life rather than emotionally.
Well, a lot of people out there believe that the reason that we have a lot of the maladies we have today is because we're carrying something from a past life, or we're carrying that energy with us, and that our outward appearance and our look is directly reflective towards the energy and the blockings. That's why a lot of people clear their chi and clear blockages, and once they're able to release that part of them, those maladies seem to go away. Do you believe that that's something that's being held over from a past life, or do you believe that that's just psychologically something that you're attaching to yourself now?
Well, I do. I think this probably something that you're picking up more in this present life. I do think that stress and worries and concerns and fears will block your energy in this life. Now, you might have been a fearful person in a past life, so you might be carrying some of those propensities into this life. But I suspect there's a lot of that is coming out of our own society, our own experiences.
Right.
And that when you get them cleared, it's not that you're clearing something from a past life, but you're actually just clearing and cleaning up some of the present life stuff.
All right. Fair enough. We've got some more questions from the board. Go ahead, Tim.
I was just going to say, if you're extremely overweight because you were starved in a previous life, somebody must not have fed me for like 5-10 years. That was, wow. Actually, Mazuriel from the boards has an interesting question, and it has to do with one of Dave's theories, believe it or not, that ghosts exist outside of time. And what Mazuriel is wondering is, does reincarnation stick to chronological progression, i.e. your next life always comes at a later date than the previous one?
Oh, that's a great question. The answer is yes and no. Let me explain.
Thank you.
The soul itself lives outside of time. All of its incarnations are actually happening simultaneously at the same time. However, in order for us to really experience the effect, we have to move through them sequentially. So in effect, the answer is both yes and no. The soul is outside of time, but we also experience our incarnations sequentially so that we can have a sort of a progression through them rather than seeing them all at one time. Additionally, it's also a limitation in our intellect. We really couldn't comprehend everything happening to us at the same time because we have a limited capability. So we have to cut it into little bite-sized pieces, if you will, and experience it one bite at a time.
How can it be then, if we're dealing with ghosts and spirits supposedly out there, if I leave this life and I'm reincarnated, how can I also be haunting my home?
Well, because the personality that you die with is actually shed. The soul goes on and reincarnates and moves into the next sequence, but the personality itself is more like a bit of an appendage that you've brought with you from the physical side back to the spirit realm. Normally that personality will be integrated back into the soul, and those life experiences will be retained there. In the case of a ghost, that personality does not get integrated into the soul immediately. It kind of tarries. It doesn't keep the soul from doing what it has to do on another level, but that personality will kind of hang out in that realm between the physical and the spiritual realms until it figures out what it needs to do and takes care of it.
All right. Some more questions, Tim?
Yeah. Actually, Paula has a question off the board and wants to know your thoughts, Mr. Danalek, on psychic abilities through reincarnation. Do you feel that they can follow us, get stronger or weaker, or would we lose them from one life to another, gain them from one life to another?
Well, I believe that the more spiritually evolved a person is, the greater their psi power. So I think that when people start acquiring a degree of psychic ability, assuming it's legitimate and not something that they're fantasizing they possess, that's actually evidence that they are moving into higher levels of consciousness or a larger number of incarnations. So I do believe ultimately, at the end of this journey, I think you do end up having psychic powers. I think you could see that, for example, in the life of Jesus. He seemed to have the ability to know what people were thinking and what they were going to do quite naturally. And I think that was a result of many, many lifetimes.
Oh, so you believe that Jesus was an old soul?
Oh, yeah, I think he was an avatar.
Okay.
An avatar is an old soul that no longer needs to reincarnate. It's already gotten as far as it's going to get, but it comes back purposely to bring others along.
All right. Okay. Now, Tim, any other questions we need to wrap up with here?
Oh, yeah, there's a few.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Let's go to Thump on the boards, who asks two questions. What about twins when they are reincarnated? What happens with their individual souls? And what about spirits that we all search for? How does this affect them being reincarnated? And I'm guessing that Thump is saying that, let's say, like Dave and I are in this life, we both reincarnate, and I'm looking for him. How is it that the two of us end up finding each other again?
Well, that's the larger matrix of the cosmic intelligence. I think that nothing happens by mistake. I think that if you're going to encounter a soul again, if say you're traveling together through different incarnations, that you will eventually come together. It's just a matter of serendipity, all the different elements coming together to make it happen. What was the other part of the question was, what happens to twins?
Yeah, what happens to twins? Like, say you're born as a twin, you pass on, you're reincarnated. How do you find that other twin, or is it something that maybe you never ever do find?
You may not. It depends if you're paternal twins, if you're, identical twins. Some twins, I think, are just two individual souls that just happen to share a womb. So, there would really be no differences between twins or just regular siblings. They would just go off on their own journeys. I do believe that there are cases in which perhaps a soul can manifest itself in two distinct personalities in cases of certain identical twins, and then when they both die, I think they do reintegrate. So it's not a question of finding the other person, it's a question of basically returning to home base, where if the other twin went before you, they're already there. So it's not like you have to search for these people. They're going to be wherever you need to be.
So you believe that souls can be split?
Well, to a degree. It's not that the soul itself is like you have half a soul, because it's split in two. You both have complete souls, but you're both sharing the same source soul, if you will. You're both generating from the same higher self, which is why identical twins often share very similar traits even when they've been separated.
Right. Well, that's, what's interesting to me about that is that, the whole debate over the cloning process. If they were to take my cells and clone me, would the soul be split among the two, me and my copy? I mean, if it's in essence me rebuilt, would the soul be part of the molecular structure, or is it an ethereal being that would just inject itself? So in essence, no matter how much of a perfect clone you could make physically, there'd be no way that could be a soul that's part of mine. Or I mean, how, I guess that's probably part of why the religious factors is so strong in cloning, is that they don't want you mucking with the soul system.
Well, first I've got to comment that the idea of multiple Daves fills me with great fear. However,
you're not the only one. I know a lot of people would be really afraid of that.
I would imagine that the higher self is capable of generating any number of personalities, and there would be plenty of personalities to manifest themselves. However, I suspect that each manifestation would have a few subtle differences between them, because even if you could clone a perfect copy of you, it's going to grow up maybe a little bit differently. It's going to have different experiences, maybe even physiological changes, even though it started with the same basic material. So that's going to alter how well you can sort of tune in to the cosmic consciousness. I believe what the brain is a receiver, not a transmitter. It's a receiver of consciousness. So if you had two brains that were constructed very close together, they're both going to pick up many of the same signals.
Right.
But there might be enough differences in them, and then also the environment that the clone goes through is going to also affect your personality down the road. So you could have very different personalities with the same clone.
But would they share the same soul?
In the respect that they both have a common higher self, a common feeder soul, yes. But they would still each have their own distinct personality. What you're talking about, actually, the difference between personalities and souls. The soul is an unchanging, infinite power source. The personalities are what change out. And when you're cloning, you're really kind of cloning a personality.
Okay.
The vessel that the soul resides in. So if the vessels are identical, it should pick up essentially the same consciousness, but they're still going to be changed over time by different experiences that they go through.
All right. Well, with that, we're going to take our last break of the evening, and we'll be back to take more of your questions for J. Alan Danalek about the mysteries of reincarnation. You're listening to the Darkness on the Edge of Town Paranormal Radio Show. We thank you. We'll be back with more right after this.
Are UFOs real? Does Bigfoot exist? Was Emily Rose really possessed? Who is the next American Idol?
She bangs! She bangs! Oh, baby, when she moves, she moves.
Thank you. Thank you.
We try to answer these questions and more each week on The Darkness on the Edge of Town.
To use the words of Mary Thompson, there is no greater pain than the loss of a loved one. So many things you never thought you would have to do, and so many decisions you never thought you would have to face. Mary describes the painful journey of losing her husband to a chronic illness in her new book, with Angels Beside Me, a caregiver story. With Angels Beside Me not only takes you through Mary's struggles, but also serves as a guide to caregivers everywhere that are looking to find peace, guidance, and hope in their own situations. With Angels Beside Me, a caregiver story is available right now at Amazon.com. Just search for the title on Amazon or for Mary herself. With Angels Beside Me is only $9.95 and available to ship anywhere around the world. If you know someone who's losing a loved one, or if you yourself are facing some sort of loss of a family member, be sure to read Mary Thompson's With Angels Beside Me, a caregiver story. Available right now on Amazon.com.
Hi, this is Russ Clark. If you're a regular listener of Darkness Radio, by now you have certainly heard my radio commercial regarding my hypnosis products. Well, I'm here today to tell you that these products work. These products have worked for many, many people, including some listeners of Darkness Radio. I stand behind my product 100%. If you give it a try and you find it doesn't work for you, you can always return it to me for 100% of your money back. Plus, I'll pay to ship it back to me. That's how convinced I am this will work for you. In addition to that, you can contact me via email anytime with any questions that you may have. I promise this will work for you. So if you want to quit smoking, lose weight, become less stressed, manage some pain, or beat some insomnia, definitely check out my website at www.powerhypnosis.net or call 866-570-3544 and ask for me personally.
If you read Taps Paramag every month, you'll be able to tell the difference between the absurd and the creepy. Taps Paramag takes you where few would ever go on purpose. From exclusive interviews with the cast of The Ghost Hunters to the latest trends in technology in the field of the paranormal. To join our journey, order at tapsparamag.com.
Are you tired of reading about what couple in Hollywood is breaking up or divorcing? Have you ever wondered where you can find the news that covers the subjects that you are really interested in? I would like to invite you to visit supernaturalnews.com. Supernatural News uses the latest internet technology to search for the topics we know you will be interested in reading. News of the latest Bigfoot, UFO, or Loch Ness Monster sightings. Read about the latest conspiracy theories and urban legends. Supernatural News, where belief and reality merge.
You may have been to the Stanley Hotel before. You may have even taken the ghost tour offered at that famous hotel in Estes Park. But have you ever truly investigated the paranormal there before? Wouldn't you like to have the opportunity to do so with Sci-Fi TV's Ghost Hunters, Jason Hawes and Grant Wilson? Well, now you can. Join us for our paranormal retreat April 1st through the 4th at the historic Stanley Hotel. To find out more about this great adventure, visit darknessevents.com. That's darknessevents.com. Hurry, spots are limited and they will fill quickly. That's darknessevents.com.
You hear footsteps and things bumping and banging in the middle of the night. Could it be paranormal activity? Or is it just Dave and Tim raiding your fridge?
Beer.
Strange things happen in the darkness on the edge of town.
And joining us on the darkness on the edge of town this evening has been author J. Allen Danalek. And let's go and tell them a little bit about how they can contact you. You have a website, right? Go ahead and give out your website information and contact information there as well.
Yeah, you can get a hold of me at my website at www.ourcuriousworld.com. I have a mail me link on there. You can punch on that and send me an email, and I always promise to get back to you.
And can people order your autographed copies of your book there as well?
Yeah, if they want to do that, they can. I'll give them the mailing address, and we can go ahead and set that up if they'd like. Otherwise, they can get the book through through Llewellyn's website at llewellyn.com.
All right. Now let's talk some more questions we have here coming in from the board. We've got a bunch of questions on tap. So go ahead, Tim.
Well, now we only have a couple.
Okay,
but we'll follow them anyways. Actually, Shay brings up a good point. Going back to the whole time travel ghost theory. She said, would it be possible to reincarnate back in time? And maybe the lesson she needs to learn in her next life would be best learned in the 6th century. Is that something that is possible or within the realm of possibility?
Well, I suppose it's possible. I'm not sure how it would affect the concept of sequentiality. It's sort of like starting, your junior year of college and then going back to your freshman year. it would kind of throw the thing off. However, I suppose if there was a particular lesson that you could learn only in one time frame.
Well, right, that would lead, because if you're trying to be a better communicator, maybe in the age of the internet and how people are becoming more solo, just sitting at home talking to a computer screen for hours upon hours, maybe that would be a better place for you to go learn communication, and stripping you and bringing you back to a time when you used to have to get out and socialize and talk and meet people.
Yeah, it's entirely possible, or else you would just find yourself in an environment where that's more of a likely to happen in the next life. So, for example, if you were born into a developing country where they didn't have easy access to the internet and you had to, go back to communicating with people, that would be more likely to happen to me than to go back to the 17th or 18th century and try it then. But either way, I suppose it's possible.
Go ahead, Tim.
Okay, and the last question I have for you comes from Cold Freak on the boards, and they say, is it possible to preview a life and then live it?
To preview it and then live it?
Yeah. What is this, like a tester audience? Let's see. Let's see how this guy's life. Yeah, all right, that's okay. I'll take that life. Is that what they're asking?
I'm thinking, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think that would be self-defeating. The whole idea is you go into these lives without really knowing what's going to happen, because that's part of the process.
Right, but if you want to learn laziness this time, that would be the way to go, wouldn't
it? You can learn that almost any time, even without an ex-life, I think, if you really want to.
That is true. So you think that that's just something that...
Well, I think what you can do is you can select certain elements of your next life. For example, a gender or a race or an economic class or something like that you want to try. But once you come into the flesh, there's an infinite number of paths that life can take. Every decision opens and closes doors. And so to see what's going to happen would only be showing you one path, one potential path. There's an infinite number of other paths that could happen. So I don't see what would be the point, once you saw what the path was, why you would need to take it.
See, Tim, so you could come back as a high-priced hooker in the next life.
Yes!
Excellent. We've all got goals, Dealing with the paranormal and with reincarnation, do you think that as we progress with the technology that we're able to create now and the places and things we're able to see and go to, do you believe that we're going to see more proof of things like reincarnation and of ghosts and spirit contact? Or do you believe that we're going to actually technology ourselves out of that realm of possibility, because so many things could be faked and manipulated that we'll begin questioning ourselves and maybe let go of the spirituality side of things?
Well, I believe what's going to happen is as we evolve as a race, I think that we're going to become more spiritually attuned to these things. And we're going to be able to perceive these other forces, these other energies on an intuitive level. Now, the technology may at some point indeed develop the ability to detect these energies in a way that we can't do right now. So you could see a kind of a dovetail effect where both the technology and our own spirituality kind of come together to demonstrate that there's more going on in the world than we imagine. Quantum physics is a good example of how we're already beginning to understand that there's so much more going on than we ever imagined possible, that I wouldn't be at all surprised if in our lifetimes science wasn't able to tap into that and say there's something going on here.
Have they done any testing that you're aware of where they've done like the EEGs, where they've hooked up the brain during a regression hypnosis to see if where you're dipping into and where these might be coming from, and if they're real thoughts or just a vividly imaginative experience?
Well, they can tell that you're going into a REM sleep. They can tell that you're, where your brain is working. They can see, where it's firing and things like that. They can't tell what it's tapping into. All they can tell you is what parts of the brain are active during these regressions. So they can say, yes, this person is showing the same effects of someone in deep REM sleep, but that doesn't tell them where the information comes from.
But are they doing tests like that? Are they able to see that maybe we're reaching into a different part of the brain that normally isn't used? Could that be what the storage units are on our brain, that they're holding those parts?
They're not actually, they're doing some tests on that, but they're finding it's not parts of the brain that aren't used. All parts of the brain actually are used. They're just finding that it's firing in areas that would not fire if you were fully conscious and aware.
Okay.
It's firing in areas where that fire when you're dreaming, or when you're in that sleep mode. So it's like a polygraph. A polygraph won't tell you if you're lying. It'll just measure the stress that you're feeling or tension. Whether or not you're lying is a different question. And they can see what the brain's doing. They can't tell where the information is coming from, though.
All right. What do you feel are the strongest advantages of utilizing past life regression? I mean, why would one want to dip into past life regression and deal with that part of their reality?
I guess it depends on how much it was impacting this present life. If you're having some trauma, you're some real fears, some phobias, you're having trouble dealing with life as it is today, maybe you're a shut-in and you're terrified of leaving your house because in a past life you were raped and killed. So it's affecting this life in a negative way. You go and get yourself hypnotized, you find out that this is what happened, you deal with it, you might enhance the quality of your life in this lifetime once you're able to finally put that behind you. It also helps just in terms of getting you to understand yourself better, what makes you tick the way you tick. I found it very useful to understanding my past by going to the past life regression. I think you can overdo it and become obsessed with it, so you're not living this life.
Right.
But it can have some benefits if you treat it for what it is and not make it the centerpiece of your life.
Well, that's good advice, and we kind of ended that with Denise Lynn, and I think that's where we'll wrap up with you, is that it's more about making the life happen now instead of obsessing about a life that's happened in the past. And
Right.
if you have questions, seek the answers, but then move on from them, learning what you've learned, to satiate your quest and your understanding for that, but don't let that define who you are or who you were. Live the life that you have now and make the best of what you have to make sure that you can, experience the most thing. I would assume that, experience the most out of this life that you can.
Absolutely, that's good advice.
Good deal. Well, Mr. Danalek, thank you very much for joining us again. And for those of you interested, you can check out his website at ourcuriousworld.com. And J. Allen Danalek will be joining us at the Stanley trip in April and in the end of March here, March 29th through April 1st. And then we're going to also be doing another trip April 1st through the 4th. And J. Allen Danalek will be there to talk to us about his case for Ghost and about the mysteries of reincarnation. He'll have autographed copies of the books you can pick up there. Thanks to everybody for tuning into the show and for being a part of the show with your awesome questions this evening. Tim and I love working with you. We'll be back again next week with a brand new show, so make sure you stay tuned to the Darkness on the Edge of Town Paranormal Radio Show. We appreciate your time, and we look forward to meeting you in the future. Have a great weekend.